How is it over there? Can you see me? Can you hear me? Is it awful?
It's all happening. Yeah, you look great.
You look great.
Let's start, shall we? As I've become an older and more mature artist, my queerness and my sexuality feels like it's more important in my music and feels like more of a motivating factor in what I do. I'm like interested in talking to other artists about what they feel about their queerness and how it's evolved. What do you think of when you think of your queerness, and what does it mean to you? Do you define yourself as queer?
I mean, I guess if I had to define myself as anything, it would be queer. To me, it's just like ultimate freedom. It's kind of like a way of living outside of these weird societal norms, gender norms, sexuality norms.
When you first started Pentatonics, did you think of yourself as queer back then, or has it been like a evolution?
First started Pentatonics. No, I wouldn't say I defined myself as queer. I just labeled myself as a gay man. I was really, really insecure, and I was in my own little shell. And I thought that I did have to live up to people's expectations of what a man should be and what a musician should be and what somebody in the public eye should be. I just felt really locked down, and I couldn't make any moves on my own because I was so afraid of what people were going to think of me. I think when I started to play with fashion and aesthetics a little bit, I think that kind of helped me to come out of my shell and explore femininity.
Do you think of your music as queer music, and then do you feel like the fashion side of it helped you reimagine yourself musically?
It's tough. I mean, I guess I would call my music queer music just because it comes from me. It helps me to release any expectations that I put on myself, any pressures that I put on myself, or any expectation that I would expect from the music industry or people that want to ingest my music.
There's things in my own process like that I would never have considered queer. I've been making like these like really out of the box choices for a long time, not really thinking of them as like part of a movement or part of a history even.
Yeah.
Which is kind of I don't know, there's some like power to that.
I feel like you've gotten freer.
I've definitely gotten freer. I think I listened to people who encouraged me to be less queer in order to make things more palatable or whatever. And I think just as a young person in music, it's hard not to allow what other people think to affect your own vision of yourself.
And it's really hard.
It's really hard to navigate, and like it or not, making a successful career in music does entail some sort of not necessarily creative compromise, but you do have to play the politics of it well enough to be able to like get your music out there and get people listening to it. Totally. And sometimes that is just a confusing thing to wrap in with this like navigating being a queer person.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to somebody that works high up in the music industry for a record label, and I was talking about my upcoming music, and I showed him the demo, and he was like, yeah, I love when you play into the masculine thing. Do that more. I mean, I know what he meant, but at the same time, it felt like, so you think masculine it's going to sell?
I've been told directly, it's great that you're gay, but your masculinity is your greatest asset. What kind of queer people do you look up to?
Who do I want to be like? I always find this question difficult because I don't typically idolize people, but the first name that comes to mind is Genesis P-Orridge, Crystal, mostly because I love their just their philosophies on life, and I really align with a lot of what they say. Lee Bowery, because he's purely performative and he made his art his entire life, which I think is my goal, even if it's a little naive. I that would be the dream, to just be an ultimate kooky character.
Tell me about it. Talk to me about fantasy. What do you think about fantasy? Because I'm like, fantasy is queerness, right? It's about like self-imagination. Go on.
I mean, it's what I'm interested in. It's what I want to become, is the fantasy. I think it's this, you're living in reality, but you're on the precipice of delusion. everything kind of seems sort of absurd and whimsical, because it is. And I think that's how I find the joy in life too. I don't know if that's a coping mechanism or not, but I do think that life is very absurd, and I want to play into that absurdity a little bit more.
I've been thinking about this so much with the protests that have been happening, which we will get to, but thinking about like the role of fantasy or the role of an artist in a bigger way, I really think is about fantasy, like, because it's about like imagining a different reality or like a potential future or whatever, and like somehow that gets incorporated into the zeitgeist. Speaking of what's next, tell me about Messer and tell me about like the stuff that we've worked on. Tell me about your vision for the next phase.
Well, I love the stuff that we worked on. It's my favorite songs of the bunch. Messer is kind of the fantasy that we're discussing. Sort of like a role model in my head, or like my ultimate form, maybe my final evolution. It doesn't feel like a person in my mind. It feels like something to attain. And also the personification of the music that I'm creating. Messer is something to work towards. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get there, but I think I'm not supposed to ever get there.
Even the imagery that you started posting feels really amorphous. Like there's a whole world without actually knowing what you're looking at.
The creation of the visual world has really, really helped me in my creative process too. Right before I start writing music, I will close my eyes and envision my third eye opening. And then I envision a beam of light going from my third eye to Messer's third eye, and I can see it in my mind. And it kind of gets my adrenaline running and connects me to my true form.
I think the way you write lyrics is kind of otherworldly, so that makes sense. So the world's been like pretty fucked lately. It feels like
crazy.
Like we've talked about the difficulty of like navigating creative flow in a really challenging time.
I do feel that it's sort of woken me up. I'm almost embarrassed to say that, because I feel that I should know better, and I should have done my research on everything that's going on Black history, on Black oppression, in everything. And so with that being said, it almost feels like anything that I do create right now it kind of pales in comparison to what's going on. It feels a little insignificant. And I think we were talking about that the other day, how it's almost like, well, why should I even do this right now? There are bigger things going on.
I feel that same sort of like heavy embarrassment in this, desire to be of service in a moment where like I actually know that my role is to be present, but listen, it's counter to how we're trained to like be as artists. After so much time working on myself and my own things and thinking about my own feelings and thinking about my own impulses, to recognize that comes from such a place of privilege and ignorance, it's really sad and it's really hard, but it's also kind of liberating in a way.
I think as two people that are white and male presenting, we have a lot of guilt and shame to work through. And it just feels like this is the next stage of human evolution, and you're either in or you're out. As queer people, we do owe so much of our freedom to Black queer people, and that's just the way it is. And so we have, I think we have a duty as queer people to remind people of history and to lift voices, because they've done the same for us in a way.
What else do you have to tell me?
Like a manifesto? Do you want words of encouragement?
I feel like you shouldn't offer a manifesto if you're not like ready with one.
Oh, maybe we'll work on it together. I would encourage people to learn their history and to learn their backgrounds and to learn about why they have the things that they do and why they have the freedoms that they do. And I would encourage queer artists especially to keep pushing forward, keep pushing the boundaries, because that's what people really want to see. And that's what creates change, I think.
I think that's such a good note to end on. You're great.
Thanks.
No, thank you.
I think that you're great. And I
Stop.
think that's it.